Hello and welcome to The Real Talk. We have looked forward to this conversation for a while, and I'm excited that we now have our baby here, and we're looking forward to having weekly conversations that will transform our thinking, will transform how we work, how we relate with people, how we relate with our family members. It's a whole lot of life lessons. My name is Jackie Lumbasi, and I'm very honored to be the host of The Real Talk. Please do follow us on the different social media platforms, the RBA official platforms, and at Jackie Lumbasi. Our guest is an amazing friend of mine. He is a social entrepreneur, Damien Mouzoun. Damien, it is a pleasure to have you on the show.
Good to be here.
How have you been?
Very well.
Great.
Trying to catch up with, they call it post-COVID, but some of us call it now post-Ukraine, even if it's not over.
Even if it's not over, yeah.
we hope that we'll get over it as well. And,
Absolutely.
And the world will come back calmer, because whatever happened outside there seemed to affect every level of our everyday life. So sometimes we wish that we shouldn't be concerned about the problem, the big problems, but sometimes they still touch us.
Yeah, whether you like it or not, they do affect us. Damien, you were born in Benin. Now, I know that Rwanda is a big advocate of building and bringing a united Africa. It's a country that is championing that cause, welcoming people from different parts of this continent to come and find a home here. You are a perfect example for that. I would love you to take us back to when you left your home country, Benin, why, and how did you end up here?
Wow, I wonder where to begin, but it was
an
interesting experience living my home country and the roots where I was born in Benin Republic. We speak in French, as you know, so we have met multiple languages that spark around the country. But for me, being a child, very much passionate and resourcefulness, I may say, from the beginning, I really wanted answer for everything. And now with time, I realized that maybe I can get answer for everything. But at the beginning, I thought I could get all the answers. And that curiosity was what drove that transition from wanting the perfections of life in Benin in terms of the kind of education we were getting, which I started questioning. And I was just about between 14 to 15 years old. So while I was close to 16, that's when I left Benin to Ghana, where I found my first type of voluntary exile. And I was a bit of stubborn finally, because I raised a concern about the quality of education that we were having. I was already in the field of agriculture, where they will tell you, you know how to farm with a tractor because you have the degree, but you will never enter a tractor. So it's as if somebody give you a driving license, yet you never enter a car itself. So I thought it was wrong, because our country was mainly based in agriculture, and they kept teaching us that the main 80% of our population rely on agriculture, and yet the education was a fraud. It really had nothing to do with what is expected to take it up. So me, I thought it was a good advocacy and challenge at the time to take on, and not knowing that it will affect so many things around me, particularly my own family, my nuclear family that was highly involved with those in power in those days, which have created the whole confusion. Because I remember we had a very famous journalist, Anik Bale, back home, that is almost like yourself, very admired, and at one point on the national television in Benin in those days, she would ask me, but Damien, you've been doing all these kind of protests, bringing young people to demonstrate, and what are you trying to prove? We want to know today, whom have you spoken to before you launch a struggle or a strike? Who is behind it?
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, no, but you can tell that I've been raising this issue from the moment I joined the school, that I saw something was wrong and needed to be fixed. And the answer I was given was that, who do you think you are? This has been like that, so it has to be like that. So I thought, no, sir, this is wrong. And now you are telling me, what is it that actually she brought to the table the fact that most of my relatives, my uncles and some of my parents, were highly involved in the politics of those days. They were in the decision making. So she named one of my uncles and said, this one, do you know him? And then I said, he seemed to be a known person in the country. And he said, yes, but are you related? And I say, does it have anything to do with this interview? She said, no, but I want to know. I said, but if you can tell by the name, he's my uncle. No question about that. He quoted another one and another one and another one. And it ended up, you see that what he was trying to show as a message to the public was basically, your uncle is the prime minister of this country. Your another uncle is commander-in-chief of the army. Another one is the president of the parliament. And now you are here complaining about the government. So how could that be the case? And I said, no, but now, I don't know where you are taking this from, but the way they even raised me as my parent, I don't think they taught us that we should say it is my side, right or wrong. And because it's my parents that are in charge, then in whether they do it right or wrong, I should take it like, oh, my parent can never be wrong. What is happening?
Interview was happening
in
Benin. Sorry to cut
you
short.
It was
happening in Benin,
right.
But then you had not made a decision to move to Ghana.
Not yet, yeah. So I was still in the country, and all these even international radio, like Radio France International, this thing attracted attention. People were calling to see what is really going on. There's this tiny boy that nobody sees, and he's really putting the country on its knees by really forcing things around. So it became, to me, it was just like the way we play game. It's something that was wrong, and I was just naively advocating for. But the misinterpretations and the politicization of all this have brought me on the spot where I couldn't hide anymore. So I told her, to me, something has to be fixed. And if the problem is corrected, and I don't care who is in charge, because it's not about who is in control, it's about, is it wrong or right? If it is wrong, then it's wrong. You won't say, oh, I'm friend to Jackie now. If she's wrong, then she become right because she's my friend. So it was very interesting to see. And later, the people of France also wanted to use the occasion to find me asylum in France as a child who is being persecuted, who is, and the way they frame it, it was Juan Gomez in those days who called in French, because that's the language, the official language in Benin. And I told him, we are talking about a problem of quality of education in Benin. And this is a problem that is affecting the farmers who are the key holders of our economy. Now, if you want to focus on my individual life, whether I'm being intimidated or whatever, I could be assassinated and all the stories he was bringing to the table, this is my country. And if somebody intimidate me, I could also intimidate the person back and say, but Damien, we are talking about a power system, the government, and your parents are involved. And I said, no, to me, I don't fear anything, because from the beginning, I heard from one of my uncle there, who is very much feared and even respected at the same time, whom one day he asked me that, Damien, I saw you doing all these things, but in politics, we are like a shepherd. We take care of the sheep, and we are not supposed to kill the sheep. And even when the animal die, we are not even allowed to eat the meat. But unfortunately, we do eliminate obstacles. And if you happen to be our obstacle, whether you are part of the family or not, you will be eliminated.
As a politician, we will eliminate
you. And that was an interview, a close conversation I had with him. But to me, I was kind of prepared, because I look at the things and I'm like, no, if it's just my life compared to what is going on, then something have to change. And unfortunately,
how old were you when you
I was between 15 and 16 years old. And that's what brought all the confusion. And people thought, okay, maybe there must be some big powers. And
exactly, that's quite intriguing that at the age of 15, and I know there are a lot of revolutions around the world that have been caused by young people. It's young men feeling like we are tired of this, we're tired of the status quo, and let's do this. They'll do it at the age of 19, 20, up to 23. But it's almost insane for a 15-year-old, 16-year-old to be thinking about how to benefit farmers and how to change the education system. But I imagine that says it speaks to the kind of upbringing that you had. So let's go back to the kind of home that you were raised in. You and your siblings. You've mentioned these powerful family members that were in politics. But in that nuclear family, how were you people raised?
You know, we had this family where anybody outside there will think that you have it all. And that was even the tragedy, I can say, because it gives that impression that you are not supposed to lack anything. But then I think this comes with most of this family that have historical lineage of, because it's a long, like my name Mouzoun has been of existence for more than 1,000 years. And we have Mouzoun all over the world. It's a kind of name we keep repeating because it's historical name. Those ancient kings and the hierarchy and everything. So they pick from those values that they use now to teach us and to raise us. Sometimes you see that it's so much like you feel if I'm from a poor family and I lack something, for instance, maybe I can go to anyone and they know I don't have anyway. But then you can go and ask because the reputation of the family will be at stake, and at the same time they won't give you, and you have to fight that constantly. But they always want us to be prepared. I think at some point I thought they were doing it out of hatred, but in the end I found out that it's about love. They love us, but at the same time, they want us to build that grit, that resilience in us, so that everywhere in any desert we will be thrown some days, we can be able to survive.
You know, I'm laughing because you've told me if you came from a family that did not have and you were lacking, maybe it would be understandable. Now, for the benefit of our viewer, I would love you to, because I know you too well, Damien, and those stories you've told me, there's a particular one I want you to repeat of your parents being called by a good friend of yours who wanted to lend a hand, but your parents said no. Can you share that story?
You know, this was even as I'm even maturing finally that I could be somebody who is supposed to be on my own. But then I was doing my studies in Kenya, and because for us, by the time you are 21 years old, they chase you from home. Boys or girls, it doesn't matter. They say, you know, the door is this side, the gate is over there, so you just need to find your way. And mind you, if you try to go, you look for a shortcut, going to any uncle or anybody within the circle or even a friend of the family to stay, that friend of the family member might be in trouble. And they do this intentionally so that you go and start life on your own and build your own capacity. So I learned that, and when I went to Kenya, I was connected to a family friend who was one of the governor there, and he hosted me in his home. So I was there with all the privileges, and by the time I was even almost 23 at the time, so I was doing just my master's in Kenya, and I was living in his home. So every time I had to be, everything is just overcovered. So I decided one day to leave the house and go rent. But my school fees was already too expensive, and he knows that. And the parents have already said, because they actually paid my school fees as a kind of prodigal's child in America, and I didn't attend, and I was in Switzerland and came back to Kenya because finally that's where I found my school. So they say I should figure it out. So the school fees was quite expensive, you know, though I was said to be having some kind of scholarship, but you still have to pay something close to 1 million Kenyan shillings every 5 months to this school. And I have to pay my accommodation, my food, my transportation. Why do you want to move from the house where you have all the privilege? So the man have to take me all the way to Naivasha for a retreat to ask me, Damien, my wife is very concerned, maybe somebody have offended you in the family. But I said to him, you know, the way we were raised, I can't just afford at 23 to be everything covered. So I want just to have that kind of space. And I moved out of the house and I was staying there. So he actually decided later to move all his kids, the 3 children, from the home. But then the latest part that almost hurt me was I wanted to build something unique for the continent, and the money that I could raise from anywhere, even sell some of the things that I already had, and take the money to buy everything from Japan. The thing came to Kenya. I don't want to do any advertisement for Kenya on that regard, but my thing were robbed. He was so disappointed. He said they could rob everybody except Damien, and he wanted to help. But then in the process, it's the son, the elder one, who will tell me later the story that the father was contemplating to give me some resources so that the idea I moved from Kenya, now I was already in Rwanda at the time, and then to support me. And by talking to my parents, they just told him that we don't raise our kids like that. Why do you want to give money to Damien? Damien
say that again. Yeah. The guardian called your parents
to talk about
it and
the
tell them
experience they had with me. Your boy have brought some change in my home. I even have to chase all these boys. They were taking things for granted and taking the life type of luxury that they didn't have to work hard to earn.
And now, he's been robbed, and we want to support him.
So we want to give him some money.
And
they
your
say,
parents say what?
What are you trying to talk about, Peter? If Damien is careless and they rob his thing, no, this boy is not careless. I visit him very regularly, even when he move out of the house and everything. I can tell you, this is one of the finest boy. He said, do you know this boy more than us? What we are trying to tell you is that we don't raise our children that way, because if you are giving money to Damien as he was careless and they stole his thing, you are not helping him. Let him carry his own cross. Let him struggle so that he can learn. And then it's like, no, but there is a limit to that struggle. He have done enough, as I have witnessed. So he tried to convince my parent, which was not possible. And he himself have to hold off, because he's like, I don't want to go too far now to become the problem. And when the son told me the story, I was almost devastated, because you are not going to give me the money. And somebody else want to give me. And he still said, please don't give the money to that guy, because he should figure it out. So sometimes it appears as if they really enjoy seeing you struggling to come up with this suffer, if the word is the best word. But then I feel, as you look at that kind of environment, and anything that should be an advantage or something that should be easy for you, they really don't want you to take life easy. And they create conditions out of all means to make sure that you have to learn by the grit, by the sacrifice, by the struggles. And I am sometimes surprised when I see the nouveau rich, as they themselves call them. They say the nouveau rich, we don't raise our kids like the nouveau rich. And what they call nouveau rich is people that never aim at the minimum and then end up by all luck or all chances to get some relatively maximum. And these people, they say that they have to prove it. And you don't have anything to prove to anybody. You have to build yourself, and that's what you have to do. So
if there's any competition going on, it's between
you don't have to be like, oh, there is the latest iPhone out in the market now. There's this. You are not competing with anybody. You have nothing to prove to anybody. But then you have to build the resilience. And one thing I've seen with them is that sometimes when we think there is no money, then they spend. And when we think the money is there, and you try to ask for anything, then they hold back. So it's as if they live in a kind of mode where it is like when they have the means, they live as if they don't, as a way to prepare for the eventualities. And when they don't have, because they have to have this positive mind so that they get things going, they wouldn't put themselves in. So you never know the mood of what is really going on. You never know when the money is there, when the money is not there, because maybe even when the money is not there, that's when they can, buy you things by surprise or help you or in some way. But then when the money is there, so they have this attitude that make them to be always prepared. As a way that they even sometimes tell us that life is like a circle. Everything comes around and goes around again. Today you might be up and tomorrow you may be down. So you have to always be constantly fighting in that kind of scenario to be, how do I make sure that whatever is thrown my way, I would carry it and bear it and still be that smiling person. So people never see us even like complaining, because it's as if you've seen the West or you've experienced the West already.
You for that. It has its advantages and disadvantages. Right. But also, and later on, as you grow older, you will realize that they were doing that out of love. There's a story of a bird that will take its It's, what do you call a baby bird? It's a chick. It's a chick? Yeah. Yes. So the bird will take the chick, fly with it, and then it's young, it's little, it's newborn, and it releases it. And that's how this chick will learn how to fly. Exactly.
And
so
if
it's
it
through the
fall,
toughest. Yes,
like,
if it falls too, please.
Then
too bad
it's
for you.
misluck for you.
Yeah. If you have just joined us, welcome to The Real Talk. We're so happy to have you here. Our guest is Damien Mouzoun. He's a young man who will tell you stories and you will think he's about 80, 90 years old. But no, he's still quite a young man, just that he's lived a life, been there, done that. We're so happy to have you on the show. Please do follow us on the different social media platforms. Use that hashtag, The Real Talk. If you have a question, you have a comment, send it through, and we will appreciate your contribution to this conversation. Damien, you have stories for days. Now, let's get to Ayina think tank. So you hinted on purchasing things from Japan because there was something you wanted to do for Africa. And I know it eventually happened. That's why today we have the Ayina think tank. What is the think tank? What inspired you to start a think tank? What do you do? How is that supposed to benefit Africa?
All right. First of all, the genesis of this came out of some of the, I can call it also part of the premature exposures that I had. When I went from Benin to Ghana, and I was almost close to 16 years old, the experiences that I had there and the way things pick up miraculously, because I was in agriculture domain, we were selling plant medicine, fertilizers, and things were really picking up in our hands as if it was kind of magic. We were making money that at that age I really didn't need that much for myself or anything. And in that process, I got exposed to many of these occasions. We had the visit in 29 of President Obama, and that kicked a whole lot of exposure where I wasn't Ghanaian then officially, but then I was invited among the young people who would discuss with the president about the program he also wanted to launch. This is a Young African Leaders Initiative. We had other program where I came across other people coming from Israel, coming to Ghana. And finally, I've had some time, almost 3 years, to work in those platforms with the Americans and also with the Jewish. And I can say that my vision for Africa was there, hidden. But by the time I started dealing with these people and seeing how they operate, I thought, Africa, we have to go back to the foundation, to the root. It's not about the buildings, it's not about the show and the big roads and everything. It's necessary to have those, but Africa, it has to start from the head. And they say in our tradition that the fish starts spoiling from the head. So if you want this thing to keep together, the head has to be. And the head is where the thinking is. So those countries run on the think tank. It's the think tanks that decide and organize and structures and sit down and look at, collect data and do analysis and promote what value they want to see, what future they want to see have to be saw before we can reap it in the future. And in my research, I realized that those think tanks were from Africa. As we say, we all come from Africa, everything began from here. So does the think tank. And the think tank were those elders who will work, and at some point they quit their jobs, and then they come to sit under it wasn't anything you have to register or do institutionalized, but then the way the children belong to everybody in the village, these elders will sit down under the tree and call on these young people, guide them, giving them life skills so that they can be prepared for real life, that they cannot learn in other ways, in the book or in the logic learning things and the normal schooling. So we had those things, and now because of all that happened in Africa, you see we had slavery in West Africa, colonialism that affected almost all the entire continent, the rest of the world as well. Then we also had things like, some of the things that happened even recently. So what I've seen is that Africa lost the authenticity of what we had as wisdom. Africa was the source of wisdom. Everybody came here to get that wisdom. And to get that, we need to go back to the think tank. And the think tank, the way I define it, you remember one time I explained to you that I say this as a tank of thoughts, a tank of thinking. So it's a container where you go to shape your mind and discover possibilities, and they have to be filled with documentation, with research, with all kinds of
reading
information.
as well.
And when you visited, you could have seen the kind of books we have and how much they cost.
It's like a museum of, not a library, I'll not call it a library, a museum of books.
So you look at it and you are like, what are these people trying to build? Because to me, I feel like our elders, they found themselves caught in a situation where they have to keep fighting until they die. Now, if we the young people don't restore what was stolen now, then we'll keep repeating the same vicious kind of reality of, pity, we are dead to blame the West and so forth. Others also were colonized. America was colonized by British. India, Japan, everybody else was colonized. We were not the only one. So if we keep only blaming what happened to us, the snake that bites us did its part, but how are we fixing ourselves? And my only humble contribution was to build a think tank so that we start thinking about how are we going to raise these kids, to what are we going to expose them to, because the fundamentals phrase that I found when I was looking for the research to get into what it is to found a think tank was, you seek what you see and you see what you seek. Those guys who made the airplane we fly today and we take those things for granted, they just saw a bird flying and they saw, oh, if a bird can fly, then that big bird they were seeing, then human being, why can't we fly? So by seeing, they seek to be like the bird. Yeah. But then they use all they got at that time. Did you know that to make the airplane, they started with bicycle, this common bicycle that we have around us here. That's where they got all the technique and the technology, testing trying to ride, and they call them the Wright brothers. And these people have tried and failed, and they were so much they were full of resourcefulness. They never took no for an answer. They tried everything, and they made up those planes that we are flying today to every part. So I feel like for Africa, if we wait for things to happen and anybody to come and make it, of course, China is investing in the country, and other big forces are trying to invest in the country. But the bottom line, what is really needed, because they say, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. But teach him how to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. For life. Africa is being fed by the fish, and they do it intentionally by keeping all these divisions and all the things. So we shape even the ideal of what Africa should be. You have people like Kwame Nkrumah, whose vision have been broken and stolen. So we bring all these visionary leaders in their documentation, the key books about them, which even sometimes you want to buy. Mind you, one time I wanted to buy a book about Thomas Sankara, and I was told the book could not be delivered to where I was in Africa here. So I had to buy the book from California, and the book was last published in 1986. And when he was alive, that was the key books, that was a kind of interview, the way we are talking now, that was done of Sankara. But they bought all those books. You can only find it with some key people in those Western world. In Africa, I searched everywhere, I couldn't find. Somebody wanted to sell the second hand of that book at $180, and I have to pay over $300 to just bring the book down to where I am, because the book will not be delivered, so somebody have to buy it there. And that's
almost 500 spent on a book.
On just one book. So we find ourselves in a situation where we said, if we don't do it, who is going to do it for us? No matter what the sacrifice it takes, I felt like this is a baby, and to restore such things, it's a country like Rwanda that are trying to catch up, no matter their, what are the limitations, because we don't have all the wealth here and there, but we try to have that vision, as you said in the beginning. I left Kenya and came to Rwanda just because I was trying to run away from the thief there. But then I found that the vision was
it would grow here, it would be built here. It should
be much more, the foundation that this place have created could be a place where those Africans who want the Africa they want, it can sparkle that dream. At least united. So
And so the head office is here, and
Yeah.
how is it working so far?
For now,
Did you get the support you needed? Do you get the support you need?
The support, of course, it will be unfair to say we are not supported, because when people hear the word support, they think about finance. I was lucky to see many elders who have the money and could pay and to give the money, but they say, Damien, it's not about the money. The vision should be enough. We can endorse this because we know what it is you are trying to do. And the endorsement, the rest you can figure out. That's why we do it as social enterprise. We have to generate the money from within, because you see the way the NGOs work in Africa. Somebody has money and start giving the money, and the NGO work with all the privileges, but by the time that person no longer give the money, it finishes.
The NGO collapses.
But now, we cannot do something that have to transcend time and space in that manner. That's why we can be NGO, and we can be those extractive companies that are just there for the money. We don't do what we do for money, but we need money to do it. So that's how we make sure that every time we bring these young people who can afford to pay, what they pay compensate for those who cannot afford. That's why sometimes people don't know exactly how the structure of payment, because it's not a school. For us, it is a center for wisdom, for knowledge, that we want to be open to almost everybody, but at the same time, it has to be in balance. Knowledge, there is a price to pay, there is a sacrifice. So parents who understand that this is fundamental for their kids to be ahead of the curve, because they say knowledge is power, even in the scriptures. So you can rule over the people. Even the kings used to send their kids, those princes, to be trained in those think tanks before even this thing were robbed from Africa. So what we are trying to do today in Ghana, in Mauritius, here in Rwanda, and the Japanese who also found the idea so interesting that they replicated the Ayina think tank in Japan now, which is working. And they do found their own, because I can get money from Africa and send to be running the show in Japan with the standards of living. Is like fetching water from the maybe the river and put in the ocean.
In the ocean.
So
Try to
I don't
the
know
ocean.
how it's going to work, but somehow it's going slowly, and we wish that this should be a continental thing. That's why we say AyinaThinkTank.Africa. When I first came here, we started with AyinaThinkTank.RW, though we have the representation in other countries like Ghana and Mauritius. But then people, I never mind critics, but people were calling to say, oh, maybe this is owned by the government of Rwanda, as if the .rw domain it's to be a government institution. Even private and para-private institution could have that. So it was interesting to see how far slowly we are trying to really build the foundation. That's why we don't make much noise. I think many people, when they come there, they get shocked that why do you have so much in this room and there is no even signpost that shows this is where this is guided. They say, no, those who are...
When I visited you, I was looking for the signpost. I didn't see it.
You couldn't see. So, but then when you entered, you are like, no, there is something more than what is happening here. You can feel it. But then the point is, those who are meant to come, they will figure it out anyway, because it's not, if you don't build the foundation, not everybody is eager, and that's also what I've seen by traveling across Africa, and I've done that extensively. Almost most countries in Africa I've been to see what is going on, and I feel like all the training I've done for thousands of young people across the continent, you can go on YouTube now and see any video of it. I did it intentionally, because when people don't know much about you, they don't have much to use against you. And if they don't know much about you, they can't help you either. That's why this kind of interview I accept to give, because this is the continent. Africa 24 has moved from France. They came here to have interview with me in French, other channel. But sometimes I just look at it that if those who need to know about this will have to know, and we have to help them to know the information. But if you start shouting before you make it, sometimes it's
you could be arming your enemies.
You are arming your enemies. They know exactly where you are headed, because this is strategic for the continent. And it's not something we should be shouting. And some people travel, though we are in this continent and people are here, and they are not even curious to figure out what is it that this boy is doing. Is it something useful or threatful, a threat? Because you can always, things can go anyway, so you have to be ready. Our people are not that much sometimes curious. You see people, senators traveling all the way from America. You see people from Israel, from Switzerland coming here just to visit what we are doing. And when they come, they are like, no, the way we look at Africa, we think the problem is with water, and so we don't think a think tank of this magnitude, of this kind of resources. We don't believe, even in our countries where all the money sometimes can happen, but we don't think this thing can be working in Africa. So it's strategic. We are going slowly.
And it's working for you well,
it will work.
You are mentioned among 100 most influential people in Africa. When did that, which year did that happen?
That was in 2017.
How did it make you feel?
I think I felt, first of all, that it was maybe premature, though I've done a lot of travel extensively across the continent. And even though I was not sharing this thing on YouTube or any of this platform and channel, but I was meeting real people. Wow. And this thing came out of the fact that people have to petition from over 150 countries and say this person and this. I didn't know about the organization at first. So they have to petition from all countries, and there is a team that go and investigate. Even they came up with this information on their site that was even shocking to me. Like, how did they know this? Because they really do investigation. And you know, today with those things of award, it has also become a name and brand. People even can pay so that they get the recognition even when they do something for it. So that's why I took it with humility by thinking that maybe it's a bit premature. Maybe I don't feel like I've done that much that could already win an award. But looking at where we started from, and this continent that is very expensive to travel, and I don't beg anyone. Sometimes people have made the rumor that, okay, his family has all the wealth, then he can afford to travel any country. And my family themselves, sometimes they ask me, Damien, about how are you doing this?
But does he get the money for that?
I just make sure that the little money, I have to limit my own privileges. Because you know, when people make money, the first thing is, how do I buy the latest this for myself and that? But the money I've gotten, I felt that it was a gift to be able to serve for a cause that was bigger than me. So it's not about my privilege. And I take a lot of example from Mahatma Gandhi. And one of my mentor, by the way, from Kenya, have put that up to me, Reverend Sam Kobia, who one day was saying that, Damien, and he have even to give me a book about to this life of Mahatma Gandhi. And by reading it, I was shocked. This guy came from a very noble, wealthy family, but he chose to live a life of poverty. That's how he liberated India by non-violence. He told his people that they should be able to fight that anger that is inside them instead of confronting. Look at how we were liberated in Africa. We all started, our ancestors, our parents, with all the credit and the respect I have for them. They wanted just to get independence and rule over the countries. Yeah. But by fighting the Western country, the way they gave them the independence has made it even very difficult for them. You see the balkanization, the problem we are still having today. Even in West Africa, you know, where I was born, I speak a language that if you cross to Togo, you see the same language. You cross to Ghana, you say the same language. And we were divided. And now they did it intentionally. But then look at India. They got
divided rule.
They made their own. Why India, as large as it is, was not balkanized as our continent was balkanized? Because they fought differently. And one country in the continent that made the exception that people don't often talk about is Botswana. I try actually to have an office in Botswana, but because of their policies for visa, I don't want any African to feel unwanted when they are going to an African country. That's why I choose Rwanda, Mauritius, and Ghana. And those countries today, I can tell you, including my native country, Benin, no African need a visa to go there. Because this thing sometimes is embarrassing to go to those countries. But I know somehow why they're doing this. But this is a country where they have accepted to be adopted by the British, where others were fighting to liberate. They say, if you have to be the governor, we should be deputy governor, so that they learn how to govern before they go forward. And somebody was sharing an interesting story with me yesterday that I think most Africans don't know about. He was talking about some of our first ladies not far from here, who has to go to school, university, as a first lady, going to the class and coming back and learning, and some of her even lecturers end up even having some position at the university, within the government and so forth. And that is also speak volume about some of this country where we've chosen, where people have understood that we can grow if we don't build the foundation. And to me, the think tanks work has to do with what has worked, what has not worked, so that we have to be prepared all the time and guide our continent instead of be shouting, and then before we know it, our leaders look at what happened to Gaddafi and all these people, because we lack strategy. And the strategy is made from the think tank. And that is our secret center. Yeah,
you're building a foundation. I'm looking forward to, we're almost ending the conversation, Damien. I'm looking forward to 6 quick questions that we'll ask you. But before then, you are a young man that has had the blessing of interacting with a lot of influential figures in the world. And I'm just wondering, what attributes would you say made this possible? Personal attributes.
I think looking back, I could say that without taking anything for granted, you see anything we do in the world, sometimes, somehow, we may not know or be aware of it. Somebody's watching.
I say that
and
all the time. Someone is always
people
watching.
are watching, and whether they praise you or they comment you, and as far as you can't even imagine. And in today's world, it has even been made worse, because people who are really at the top, the kind of people that sometimes I come across and I feel like very humbled that these people can consider you, you realize that they can get any information. Just by the first time they hear your name, it's enough for them to know where you've been, what you've done, and everything, even if you don't post it on social media. So I think in today's world, for my fellow Africans, we really have to be very intentional and careful about what are we really doing. Even in our, that's what I try to do. And it's still a long way, because I'm not any accomplished person to the point to think that, you know, I can give any lecture to anybody at this point. But I feel, in all humility, if you keep doing what is right, because what challenged most people was, I go from country to country. And when people are sowing seeds, they are sowing it near their neighborhood so that they can reap it on the land that belongs to them. And that's have been a tradition. People only invest in the country where they feel they belong. So that one day when they want to go back and be elected, anything, then, so they are not doing it unconditionally. They are doing it for a sake of the future. If there is any chance, they will say, I'm the one who built this road, I'm the one who taught these people. But then for me, it was weird, because I could do these things all across Africa, and sometimes out of Africa, going to countries like India, Saudi Arabia, Israel, because I felt that we are all linked, we are all connected. And that attracted a lot of people, a lot of people with great values and influence and humility to say, okay, this boy, and sometimes when people go through our endorsement, even on our website, some people wonder, like, Damien, how do you meet these people? Because we see their signature there. And these are not people, some of them don't even use mobile phone. Some you can meet them on the street, because even they have to fly, they wouldn't be flying on the line that you might come across them. So how will you meet such people? But the fact that you are trying to do something that is unique, and however small it is, but you are trying to do it without holding to what is it that I'm benefiting. Because when I leave country like Benin in 2011 and 12, or going to country like Uganda, going to Madagascar, going to those countries to serve freely, what is in it for you? I wasn't having any position within the African Union for and I record even in 2013, there was this former Prime Minister of Sudan who had to award me, together with those African Development Bank and the UN, for my extensive contribution across the continent. And they were thinking about the topic that day was regional integration in Africa, because that's when we spoke about the African passport that actually they tried to launch here back in between 2015 2016, when they hold the African Union Summit, where they were trying to have a passport for African, and they put it in 2063. That's another debate for another day. But I felt,
we'll have another interview, you know, specifically for that.
But then the point is, for me, those people, they are watching. And the way they have reached out to me to say, come to South Africa, and I was awarded. And at the time, I think I was remaining with 7 countries in Africa where I haven't set my feet. But I go to this country, and they know how expensive it is. Even those who have their own plane, it's still not easy, and means, so they see that as something that they want to embrace and encourage. And some of them, sometimes I feel that kind of warm and encouragement that they have, like, we wish we could be doing this. And if every young person in Africa, or even the elders, could be thinking Africa, we won't be where we are. Because most of the time, you see even what happened during the Balkanization, it was like everybody wanted to be the boss in a land that is just a tiny one that is cut for him.
Yes.
And if you
I'm
want
the ruler
to
of this
align
place, I'm
with
the king of this place,
let's
I'm the head.
imagine we have the East African community now as one country, or West African community as one country. It means we will have one president.
One president, yes.
Imagine China have one president, India have one prime minister, and these are 1 billion plus half population, and they have one president. And for us, you have country with 1 million people, and they have a president. So in that regard, it have favored the West against us because nobody was thinking continental or unity,
individual.
And we were thinking in individual, in what do I benefit and so forth. And that I think I'm trying to raise in the young generation. Those who understand, they really want to give their words and their endorsement and their support, even if they can't give us directly finance, but their prayers help the work even to make its own way, and the fact that people trust. Sometimes you have kids from parents whom you never met before, and they send them, and the kids never come to a country like Rwanda, and 13 years old child have to fly alone and come to a place where the parents do not even know the person they are sending their child, but they have references that tells them this kind of person, there is something we can expect, and then you can just mess up because
and they're seeking,
there are a lot of
they're looking for something.
Right.
Damien, when I look at you, you're an extremely accomplished person. You just said you don't see yourself as accomplished. But I'll tell you this, you are truly accomplished. And I read somewhere, someone said, if you want to achieve greatness, set out to do something that is not about you. Every person that goes out to do something that will benefit the community, benefit a larger, group of people and not themselves, will eventually benefit as a person. They will get the recognition as a person because you started off at that place that was not selfish. And so you have done so well. In one word, is humility inborn or is it learned?
It is both. First, when people come with a humble nature, and you can see this even in countries where you feel that sense of humility as a country. You go to a country like Switzerland, and you see that you can take even the bus with the president. It's no big news. But these are some of the wealthiest countries in the whole world. So if you grow up in an environment like that, and I remember sometime when we are taking those train and buses and around the city, when you see a big, huge vehicle, somebody, a Mouzoun, will tell you that must be a black man. And you see that it's a black man driving the car there. No, I don't take the offense, but I look at it and I'm like,
we'll have to show off.
Have to prove it. But these people, somebody may even own his own plane, but then he's taking the public transport like anybody. But the level of maturity these people have reached, it have shaped that kind of environment. So it can be inborn, but sometimes it can be learned. And I get shocked when we travel to those countries and we come and we see the level of arrogance sometimes that we have in our own society. That is not helping. And I think that we can do better because when you see, you should be able to seek. Those people saw the bad and they made plain for us. So if you go to countries, you see what is happening. Some of the countries in Africa are doing quite well in that front, like Mauritius. And to me, when I look at country like that, I'm like, then Africa is not like, it's not that all is not lost.
There's hope.
I still have
get
hope.
there.
Yeah.
We're talking to Damien Mouzoun. We'll soon be coming to the end of this conversation. He is a social entrepreneur and founder of Ayina think tank. He has explained to us what the think tank is about, and it is something that he hopes will continue to serve the continent. I have one more thing that I need from Damien. 6 questions. These are quick questions that will help us even know him better. I mean, this is my favorite part of the program.
Right.
6 cues, and this will be quick. What's your favorite book?
Well, the first book that had challenged me, you saw it yesterday, was called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, because I think everything began from the habit. And that really, I saw a lot of people, that book resonated, in every meeting of leadership you go into today, they teach about that book. But if you allow me to add a bonus, there was a book called Net Welding. That book is not that famous, it's not known, but
Networlding.
networlding, like world, like the world.
There's
so
networking, so there's
and
networlding.
So that book, if you look for it, unfortunately those are not books that you can find in the stores, but you can find some people who can sell the second hand, and it's a very powerful book. Even on the Kindle, I try to recommend to some of the friends to get in there on Kindle. But this is also another book that will have a tremendous impact on understanding human, the way we interact, that even the people that they say they are bad, it's just the circumstances that shows that. And sometimes we don't know them enough, and we have to get closer to people. The more you know people, the more you'll be their friend. But sometimes we just stick to the prejudices. We sit behind and just want to judge the book by the book, the cover. And that doesn't really work in the human sense, because we are spiritual being having human experience, not the other way around.
Yeah. Your favorite food?
Right, I love vegetables. So, but unfortunately,
that's
I'm not full vegetarian. All the vegetables and the fruits and the fresh food. Okay. I really love fresh food, not the ones in the fridge and the other things. I tried my best to keep shape.
That's good.
Yeah.
Your worst fear?
Yeah, my fear remains. You'll be shocked. It's about Africa, because sometimes I think some of us do not match where we wish to be, but the money we have invested, the life we have sacrificed, and we saw what others have sacrificed, and some even made the ultimate sacrifice by their own life for this continent, and it's as if we are not waking up. So every day when I look at the geostrategy, geopolitics, what is going on with this war now between Russia and Ukraine and so forth, I feel that my fear is that Africa will not understand, though I'm working towards people to wake up, because the problem is in the mindset, and we have that, and we are here tearing each other down. I think you might have heard recently when the president of Benin have appointed some few people coming from Rwanda, and it made headline all over. But French people have been appointed in that government, people from all tribes and all part of the world. But when it's black, it's like we have that self-hate sometimes. I don't know if it's the colonialism or the slavery that have made us on that level. You saw South Africa, what happened between this xenophobia. So sometimes I feel like, are we really ready? So Africa still my fear. Yeah.
And then your fondest childhood memory, make that quick. Damien.
The memory was the kids that we go to the village when we were from this kind of relative privilege, and we drove to the village, and you see these kids there. They are seemingly not like clean like us, not well dressed like us, but they are really the innovators. When they needed their toys, they made them from anything they found around them. They will use banana things to make the ball, to make the cars with the things that people have got out of the drinking stuff.
We made the ball, because I was raised in the village as well. We made a lot of toys from waste.
But then we dress well in the city, and that's something that I feel like we say we are smart just because we put on the latest dress of that costs all the money,
and we can afford toys from China.
Things imported, and then we say we are smart, but we are not really smart. Those kids in the village, if they have the means that we have and we take for granted, they could really make this continent and this whole world, an incredible place. But sometimes we don't consider them much because they are not the standard that we want to see. And I think if we can start paying attention to the innovation and the creativity in these kids that are disadvantaged in those villages, that's one thing that I stick with me growing up.
And what's the favorite place that you've been to? All the places you've visited?
Japan has been shocking to me because they even wanted me to stay in Japan. They didn't want me to go back to Africa. And I told them, Africa needs me. You guys have done it all here. They have organized everything, that even where you have to park your bicycle, it have to be shaped. And I mean, you can make mistake in Japan. I think they have built a society that I feel anywhere in the world, I haven't seen that level of discipline, of cleanness. We say Kigali is clean and this, but if you go to Japan and you see that these guys, they are really on top of their game, and they don't make much noise, unfortunately.
If you had to choose between a book, this is my last question, between a book and a Bible, a biography and a Bible. Yes, which one would you pick?
Between a biography and the Bible. Wow. A biography, I would choose still the biography of Nelson Mandela. He has a book called Conversation with Myself. I think everybody should read that book. Every African in particular.
Wow.
Conversation with Myself.
Nelson Mandela.
Nelson Mandela.
Damien,
when he was in jail.
Damien, thank you.
Thank you.
It has
very
been
much.
such a pleasure sitting down with you. You have a great story, and I'm hoping that everyone that has watched this conversation will get curious to know some more, but because there's a lot that we actually have not touched on. We've just stuck to the surface. It has been such a great pleasure to have you with us. Our guest today was Damien Mouzoun. He's a social entrepreneur. If you go to Twitter, you will find Damien Mouzoun. If you go to Google and type in Ayina Think Tank, you'll get to know more about his work. My name is Jackie Lumbasi, and it's been such a pleasure to host this conversation. Let's see you again next week.